In his latest book, The Adventures of Herbie Cohen, World's Greatest Negotiator, best-selling author Rich Cohen writes how his own father's natural gift of negotiating was so prolific it inspired parts of the original Pulitzer Prize-winning play from which the movie was adapted. Rich also details his father's role in major events in history, including the negotiations during the Iran hostage crisis. And Rich joins us now. Rich, it's great to see you. I'm reading this book and I'm thinking to myself, this almost can't be real. Your father's life is Forrest Gumpian, I think it's fair to say, beginning on the streets of Brooklyn, where he ran around with Sandy Koufax and Larry King as kids and grew up to be at the center of so many moments in American history. Tell us first a little bit about your dad, Herbie.
Well, he's from Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. And he has lived his entire life by a philosophy, which is the secret to a good life is to care, but not that much, and approach life as a game. And he's always getting into and out of jams, and everything he did as a, Carter, the David Mamet play, everything came out of his ethos as a kid and out of the Brooklyn streets. And that's what amazed me, because he wound up lecturing at Harvard and Yale, but it was all stuff that he learned in his childhood gang, the Warriors, as a kid, and it created kind of a whole view of life that I grew up with, which was approach life like a game.
And he wrote the book when you were a kid called You Can Negotiate Anything, and he proved that. He worked with the Justice Department, he worked with the CIA, he trained SWAT teams, and as I mentioned a second ago, he was kind of there at the center of the negotiations to get the hostages out of Iran. What was his role in that?
His role was sort of, he looked at everything like going into a Sears and buying a dishwasher, which is, he thought Jimmy Carter made a huge mistake when he said, I'm not leaving the White House until the hostages are released. He said very simply, what just happened to the price? And his role was to sort of act a little bit unpredictable and a little bit crazy, which is what Reagan did when he came in. And he became sort of famous, and when I was a kid, when he predicted when the hostages would be released and was right within, I think, 7 minutes. And I can give you one quick anecdote, which to me is his whole philosophy, which is, I was playing the board game Risk with him when I was a kid. I don't know if you remember that game, the game of world conquest. Yeah. And he had me surrounded in Europe on every side. And I said, is there something I can do to get you not to annihilate me? And he looked at me and he said, give me your Snickers bar. I'd been saving a Snickers bar. And I said, what are you talking about? That's not part of the game. He said, lesson number one, everything is part of the game.
Everything's part of the game. I don't know. I'm going to put Hunt for Red October, Willie, up there with Alec Baldwin's Finest Hour, by the way. I love the story of your dad writing the book, disappearing into the basement, writing it longhand, coffee getting all over it, but then sending it off, 23 times to publishers, and every single time it got rejected. So how did he actually get the book out? If everybody stopped publishing it and didn't want to publish it, how did it become so famous?
Well, he did. He went down to our basement, and I should say it was an unfinished basement that flooded when it rained, and it rained a lot. And we forgot he was even down there. We just hear occasional screams of coffee, more coffee, please. And then someone had to bring him down a pot of coffee. And there was a James Thurber line about his early stories, which is they came back faster than ping pong balls. I think he sent them out to every publisher he could find, but he was creating a new genre, which was a business book, which is really about life and how to get by in life, and it's good for family. It starts with a story about me, and he finally found this guy, Lyle Stewart, who'd published the Anarchist Cookbook and all this crazy stuff, who was as crazy as him and said, I will publish this. And then he went around in our car and he sold it all over the country the way like a record man would break a new record just by hand in different cities. And he had a dream. He's a New Yorker who lived in the Midwest. He's a fish out of water. And his dream was to be #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list. And he got, I think, all the way up to #2. And the only reason he couldn't get to #1 is because #1 was occupied by Carl Sagan's Cosmos. And to this day, when he's staring wistfully at the stars, I know he's thinking, God damn you, Carl Sagan.
Not to turn this into an Alec Baldwin tribute, but add Jock Donaghy on 30 Rock. But Rich, this book's extraordinary, and it's hard almost to believe the life that your father lived. But talk to us about you today. Your father's lessons. You mentioned Risk. Are you able to, in your life, take his negotiating tips, and have they worked out?
I'm like a coach's son terrible at negotiating myself because he did it and I was embarrassed to do it. But his bigger idea, which is win-win, which is for you to win, it might be satisfying if you win, the other side loses, but that's a deal that's never going to last. Both sides have to come away feeling like they got something and they have their dignity intact. And I feel like it's a lesson that's now more than ever needed because people see everything as zero sum and as the pie is shrinking. And his whole idea was everybody rises up together. And when I would go to him as a kid with a problem, he would say, it's just a game. It's just a walnut in the batter of life, just a blip on the radar screen of eternity. And that's what I got from him, the sense that none of this really matters, so you might as well have fun. Or, as he would say, if you're walking on thin ice, you might as well dance.
There's a lot of wisdom in there, but it's also just a really fun book to read. Sure to be your next bestseller. It's called The Adventures of Herbie Cohen, World's Greatest Negotiator. Rich Cohen, thanks so much for being here. Great to see you.
Thanks, Willie.
And that does it for us this morning. Jose Diaz-Balart picks up the coverage right now.